Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salaila Makudi. Our time 10 minutes past 8, and we're going to be kickstarting today's show with a very, very concerning turn of events. South Africa's once formidable defense manufacturer, Denel, you know about them. Well, they're facing yet another existential test. And this time around, it's not just about finances or governance within the organization or some of the missed deadlines as it was always the norm. It's about the people that are working at Denel. A new report is suggesting that the company has lost quite a significant number of its most experienced engineers and program specialists. The very individuals essentially that are responsible for designing, building, and delivering complex defense systems that I think as South Africans we've been priding ourselves over the years, and it's a very, very concerning turn of events. And to put into perspective, Denel has shrunk from over 5,000 employees a decade ago to around 1,600 today. And the loss of very, very critical skills is now directly affecting its ability to execute some very, very key projects. This is a company that sits at the very heart of South Africa's defense capability, from missile systems to armored vehicles that are lauded the world over. And when it struggles, it raises the questions that I think all South Africans are now asking themselves, or at least they should, inevitably, about national security, about industrial capacity, and whether the country is losing strategic expertise to the global market. And that's what we're going to be looking at this morning. What exactly is going wrong at Denel? And is this a temporary skills gap of some sort, or I don't know, a slow erosion of South Africa's defense sovereignty? And we're going to be bringing in Guy Martin, journalist from defenceWeb, to give us more insight on that. Guy, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to News and Views.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
No, the pleasure is all ours. And I think we'll jump right into it. If you can give us perspective here, help us understand just the scale of the problem at Denel. How critical is this loss of engineers in practical terms, and for Denel's ability to deliver, to do the work that has put them, I think, at the pinnacle of, one of South Africa's SOEs for a very, very long time?
So it's quite a serious issue, the loss of skills. As you mentioned, Denel had 5,000 employees a decade ago, and that was before state capture kicked in, when the company was making a healthy profit, when it was delivering on its orders, and then it's been downhill since then. And Denel's sitting on about 1,600 staff in total. That includes about 800 reasonably skilled people on the sort of factory floors, machine operators, technicians, and so on, and about less than 200 engineers. That's been seriously impacting its ability to deliver on projects, particularly on the missile and unmanned aerial vehicle fronts. So there's multiple divisions within Denel, and the missile and UAV division is the one that's most severely impacted. And to give an example of this, the South African Air Force contracted Denel many years ago to deliver A-Data air-to-air missiles. This program has been years and years behind schedule because Denel just doesn't have the staff to actually manufacture the missiles and get them delivered. So what Denel's been doing is trying to bring in outside help to deliver on the orders that it does have. And it has been working with other companies in the industry to contract in engineers, basically, to get those projects finished. But it's not an ideal solution. Deliveries are still quite far behind schedule, and the company is battling to deliver. It's had some orders cancelled because it can't deliver. It still battles with trust and reputation. A lot of foreign customers are a little bit hesitant to place orders because they're not sure how quickly they can be executed. So Denel does say it has a fairly healthy order book. It has received a number of quite important contracts on the artillery side, and it seems to be better placed to deliver on those on the landward system side. But when it comes to missiles and UAVs, there's a major shortage of skilled personnel there. And a lot of those staff, they left for the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia in particular. It's been estimated that at least 300 engineers left Denel, particularly from the state capture time of about 2015, 2016 onwards. And they went to work for UAE and Saudi companies. So what had happened was when those staff moved over, they took a lot of their IP with them. And there were a few cases where those staff members were still in touch with their colleagues back in South Africa, and they would then get that IP transferred. They would poach other staff, and there was a major exodus from Denel. Understandably, to some degree, because Denel was battling to pay salaries for many years after the state capture era. So a lot of these engineers, you couldn't really blame them for wanting to leave. But the end result is very few have actually come back, and Denel is sitting with this big skills crisis.
I want us to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to focus on that point, because that's what we're hearing. The fact that many of these engineers are being drawn to opportunities that are overseas, as you mentioned, particularly in the Middle East. And one of the key reasons is, the financial aspect of it. But I want to touch on whether or not there's a deeper structural, issues within Denel in itself. You mentioned state capture, which was very, very, key when it comes to, giving us almost an insight on just how bad things are at SOEs, Denel being one of them. And I want to unpack on that quite briefly, but we'll do that after the short break.
It's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
When disaster strikes, families lose everything in an instant. Homes destroyed, communities displaced. Hope fades into uncertainty. Our Global Emergency Fund ensures we respond without delay, delivering food, water, shelter, and healthcare to families in need. To support our Global Emergency Fund, visit islamicrelief.org.za.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Operation Kurbani, Maulana Timur will once again be taking a trip abroad for Kurbani. Many people in the villages live well below the poverty line and only eat meat on the days of Eid al-Adha. Support this cause at 2,170 Rand for 7 shares or 310 Rand per share. Contact Maulana Timur, Maulana Sajjad, Maulana Hamad or Maulana Abbad on 011-852-6324 or 072-299-9268 or 082-368-6866 or 072-697-0131 or 073-576-9786. All slaughtering will be supervised by a team of foreign and local ulama. visit www.operationkurbani.org.za.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views. Myself, Salailo Makwidi. The time is 20 minutes past 8 Central African time. And if you just joined us, we're having a really, really interesting conversation with defenceWeb journalist Guy Martin. And we're looking at the crisis out in Denel, South Africa's SOE, which, was lauded for, its precision work that they used to do when it comes to weapons manufacturing. And they are in a crisis. And this time around, it's not about the usual headlines that we were always getting, maladministration, the financial troubles that Denel used to have, or because of state capture. But this time around, it's about an exodus of talent, a brain drain, essentially. Many of the engineers at Denel are being drawn to opportunities overseas, particularly in the Middle East. And it's making it difficult now for Denel to do much of its work. And when packing this with Guy Martin, defenceWeb journalist. And Guy, thank you so much for staying with us. Before we went on to that short break, just to recap, just giving insight on Denel and how it ultimately found itself where it currently finds itself. And the brain drain aspect of it, I think, is very, very key here. From your point of view, do you think it's purely financial, this exodus of talent that we're seeing from Denel, or are there other deeper structural issues within the organization itself? You mentioned state capture, which was very, very key, and ultimately, I think, saw most South Africans almost getting an idea of just how bad things are at Denel. Are there maybe other reasons that we can point to say this is why majority of the talent within Denel essentially packed up and left?
I think the main reason why there was this exodus was directly because of the state capture era. So ironically, Denel was a victim of its own success. It was one of the few state-owned companies back then that was posting a good profit. It had good management in place. It was receiving good contracts. It was delivering on those contracts. And the Guptas and co, they saw there was money flowing through Denel. And so they got a dodgy board appointed, and the whole state capture process began. And that basically ran Denel into the ground. They couldn't pay staff. Some people lost their houses. There were a number of suicides because people couldn't afford to send their children to school. It was quite a serious time. And obviously, people needed to work. So there were a lot of opportunities in the UAE. Denel was already dealing with certain companies in the UAE on joint ventures and partnerships. So there was a legitimate relationship before the state capture era. And then that kind of took a different direction once things started falling apart at Denel. And it became almost a predatory move to acquire talent from Denel. And with that talent came intellectual property, because the UAE and Saudi Arabia were trying to build up their defense industries almost from scratch. And they've pretty much succeeded. Today, the UAE, they make drones, they make guided weapons, they make small arms, armored vehicles. Their industry is huge, and they've gone from being a weapons importer to a weapons exporter. And a lot of that was with the help of former Denel personnel. But not just Denel personnel. We also saw an exodus from companies like Paramount to a much smaller degree. But there has been quite a shift. South African engineers moving over. So multiple reasons for the exodus from Denel. And state capture, I think, was the core reason for that happening. The and the trouble is with this myth that South African labor is cheaper than elsewhere, which is actually not the case. So to retain an engineer in South Africa, you often have to pay better than overseas rates because there's all this pressure from foreign companies to snap up our engineers. So that just makes it even harder for companies like Denel, Paramount, and other defense industry companies based here to compete with the likes of, say, the Edge Group in the United Arab Emirates.
Very, very concerning. When Denel can't retain his technical talent, like you mentioned, what does that do to its credibility, especially with clients that they have both here locally and internationally? You mentioned that there are some key projects that they have with the government here in South Africa, and we know that the world over, Denel is involved with quite a lot of countries when it comes to defense weapons manufacturing. Does that taint the reputation of Denel? Are we seeing them losing their sheen, as you mentioned that at some point they were the best of the best when it comes to state-owned enterprises here in the country?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, Denel has admitted many times that its international reputation has taken a major knock, and we've seen orders being cancelled for various reasons. So, for example, some years ago, Egypt, they wanted to sign, I think it was about a 5 billion rand deal for missiles, but Denel wasn't able to secure the financing for that. They couldn't get a loan because the banks didn't want to deal with Denel because of the whole state capture fallout. So that knock in credibility directly impacted its ability to make sales. And Denel has admitted that its difficult relationships with banks and financing houses has made it quite difficult to not only secure deals, but to secure funding for raw materials and all the necessary things to actually execute a contract. So Denel's been working quite hard to try and rebuild its reputation, but it's got a very long way to go because it's still not seen as a completely reliable or trustworthy partner. People sign a contract and they're not sure exactly when things are going to be delivered, what the quality is going to be like, if there are going to be problems down the road. Because earlier this year, there were talks that Denel wasn't able to pay some of its divisions. And luckily, they were able to make a plan. They were able to pay, I think it was PMP, the small arms ammunition division. They managed to pay them at the last minute. So things are still very precarious. And as much as Denel is trying, it's very difficult to bring back your reputation when you're still having like major structural issues. And this is what we're seeing with the skills shortage. That's one of these structural issues that still hasn't been fully resolved. Denel say that they've managed to fill up all the vacancies at the senior levels, but at the lower levels with the engineers, there's still a major backlog. So to give you another example, at PMP, they had such a shortage of staff that they would have to rotate them between different units. So 1 month, the staff would be manufacturing, say, 9mm rounds. The next month, they would move to the next factory. They would be doing 7.62mm rounds. They couldn't run all their facilities concurrently. So that's just one example of how the skills shortage is affecting production.
And do we know which key programs are most at risk here right now? Are they projects that we're looking at that are delayed by a very, very long time, or ones that risk cancellations or just compromised quality overall?
I think the biggest one is probably the Badger infantry fighting vehicle. So the South African Army was supposed to get over 200 of these vehicles under Project Hoofhuister. But this is more than a decade delayed. Denel is still finishing development of the vehicle, and once that development is done, then only they can move to production. But this project is so far behind schedule. A lot of money's been spent on it. Billions of rands have been spent on it, and there's not much to show. So that's sort of I would say that's probably the flagship headline failure, if you will. And also on the missile side, we were supposed to sell ADART and missiles to Brazil because they co-developed the missile with us. But because of delays, they've acquired another missile for their Gripens. And we haven't had any more orders apart from the order from the South African Air Force. So the missile and UAV side, they're struggling quite a bit. The landward side is doing a little bit better. They're manufacturing artillery systems, new barrels. They're doing some upgrades for international clients, and there are more skilled engineers and technicians available on the landward side. So they fared a little bit better. But when it comes to particularly the missile side, there were very few skilled engineers in South Africa able to work on those sort of projects, and that division is really struggling. And as I mentioned, the deal with Egypt that was supposed to be for Umkhonto surface-to-air missiles that the Egyptians wanted to fit to their frigates, and they were willing to place the order, that fell through. So that was billions lost in just one potential deal. So yeah, there are still quite a few areas where Denel is struggling.
And one thing that stood out for me as I was reading about this is, how they're trying to mitigate this crisis. Denel says they're essentially relying on what they call a hybrid model. So they're outsourcing, they're retraining and contracting. Is that a viable long-term solution, or do you think they're just plugging holes at this point?
I think it's just plugging holes. The problem is that there aren't, especially like on the missile side, there aren't all that many engineers working at other companies in South Africa that have that necessary expertise. So while that the hybrid model and contracting in skills, it is a solution, it's not an ideal solution. And I appreciate the fact that Denel is trying, and they do have some sort of techniques in place to mitigate the problems. But we're still seeing major delays with, say, ADART deliveries, and there are other examples as well. So while the situation could be worse, it could be a lot better as well.
And lastly, before I let you go, what could be the long-term solution here? Is it more political, or I don't know, Denel within itself as an organization can try and mitigate to try and be the fancied organization once again for engineers to work and ply their trade in?
I think the best solution for Denel is for it to be properly restructured so that things just work as they should. But one of the problems with Denel is that it is geared toward, as a state-owned company, it's geared toward supporting the SANDF, and in the past it's relied quite extensively on domestic orders. Now the defense budget has been shrinking and shrinking. It cannot rely any longer on orders from the SANDF to sustain itself. And at least the company's management has said that they are trying to get at least 60% of their orders internationally. Most other South African defense companies, they get about 80% of their orders from international clients. I think Denel needs to push even more to try and secure international orders, and then make sure they can actually deliver on and execute that. The trouble is they've lost a lot of credibility. The banks don't want to deal with them. Suppliers are very wary because they've had bad experiences of not being paid during the state capture era. So Denel's almost in limbo. It's trying to get moving, but there's a lack of trust, lack of support, lack of capacity. So I think what they need to do is work a bit more closely with other defense companies, expand the hybrid and partnership model, and get other companies to assist them to get back to actually producing and delivering on projects. So I think what also would help is that if the government was able to just give them a little bit more financial support so that they could actually clear the backlog of orders, get the factories flowing, and once that happens, everything else will fall into place.
Well, there have it. Guy Martin, journalist at defenceWeb. Thank you so much for joining us and for giving us, I think, a very, very sobering look at the state of Denel. It is very, very concerning, but we're going to leave it here for now. Really appreciate it.
You're most welcome.
There you go. Guy Martin from defenceWeb, again, giving us a sobering look at the concerning state of Denel. Hey, I think at some point, Denel was one of those organizations that you prided yourself in as a South African. Almost a microcosmic of everything else that's happening in the country. Decline, decline, decline. Very concerning. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, News and Views continues.